If you're going to Mass to be entertained, you're going for the wrong reason. Hello, my fellow Saints in Progress. This is Mike from Catholic Treehouse, and I'd like to welcome you to episode 26 of the Saint in Progress podcast, your source for inspiration, information, and directions for your soul's journey back home to the Father's house. And as always, you can find us at catholictreehouse.com or saintinprogress.com and on Substack. Man, I had a really interesting last Friday night. My daughter plays softball, and we were at the game, and she's up at the plate, and she hits this pop fly that goes up over the backstop, over the shed behind the backstop, out into the parking lot, and lands square on the windshield of my wife's car. And yes, indeed, she broke it pretty good. That was quite the spectacle. So that was the big thing from this past week for me. I mean, it's hard to believe we're halfway through May already, isn't it? And Memorial Day is right around the corner, and that means, of course, all the typical, war movies and things like that. And I tell you something, I am the absolute worst person to watch a military movie with. Because I'm the guy who's sitting there saying, that's not right, they're doing this wrong. I'm a big stickler for the details. Like when I was watching Top Gun when I was a kid, like in middle school. And I was talking about these MiG-28s and there are these black planes and everything. I'm like, that's not a MiG-28. That's a Northrop F-5. They don't paint them black, And, again, you don't want to be watching a military movie with me unless I'm already, going to tell you that it's going to be a good movie and a fairly accurate movie because I'm going to ruin it for you, bottom line. So that kind of brings me to the point of this episode right here, and that is, we need to be very careful when we're looking at the information that we consume. So for starters, what I want you to do is this. Go get your Bible. Now, make sure when you get it that you look at the spine, look in the inside cover. Make sure it's a Catholic Bible. You'd be surprised how many Catholics have a non-Catholic Bible that they're using. If you have a King James, for instance, that is not a Catholic Bible. It's missing 7 books. And the translation is a little, it leaves some stuff to be desired when it comes to accuracy. And there are some other ones too, like the New English Translation and a few others. So make sure that it says, Catholic edition or something like that on it. And the absolute best way to make certain that the Bible that you're using is a Catholic Bible is to look inside the front cover around the copyright page and the title page. And there should be it's called an imprimatur. I'll say nihil obstat and then imprimatur. Anything that the Catholic Church or a bishop has approved as being accurate and in line with Catholic teaching and everything else approved by the church will carry this imprimatur seal in there. Okay. So I'll tell you what does not have imprimaturs is when you go to the grocery store and they have like the Nat Geo and Time, who was Jesus Christ, all that kind of stuff. That stuff will definitely not have an imprimatur. So save your money and don't buy it. The other thing we have to be careful with is not just stuff that appears to be religious from the outset, comes off as entertainment, but it's presented as fact. And then we accept it as fact. I'll give you an example. Recently, my wife and I were watching this show hosted by Dan Aykroyd called The Unbelievable. Well, I like Dan Aykroyd and all. The Great Outdoors, was a great movie, as was Ghostbusters. But, in his personal private life, there is some occult stuff in there. He's very public about that. His father was involved in the occult and this kind of thing. And that's really not the point of this program, but the point is we have to be careful because we don't know who is providing us various bits of information. So we're watching this episode, and it's about something like strange traditions, I believe it was called. They talk about this thing called sin eating, which was around in the 1700s over in England. And the gist of it is that when someone would die, they would put the body out, and they would put a loaf of bread and a pint of ale and put that on the dead person's chest. Supposedly, this would absorb the sin, and then they would pay some beggar or whatever to come and eat the bread and drink the ale and eat the sin along with it. to speed the person's journey to heaven. They somehow tied this in with purgatory, and while they didn't mention the Catholic Church, they did mention that it was purgatory and it was meant to speed the person's release from purgatory and everything else. The person presenting it, his little graphic says his name is Don Wildman, historian, so he was supposedly the expert on the topic. Well, here's the audio clip. Here's what he had to say about it.
Purgatory is an idea introduced in the 16th century during the Protestant Reformation.
Okay, now here's the problem. Okay, well, there's two problems. First, this is just not true. Okay? If you do a little bit of research on your own, you'll find out that the idea of sin eating came about as more of a cultural thing from the people of England, who were all Protestants. This whole thing came up after the Catholic Church was made illegal in England. They had kept some sort of idea of this middle place between heaven and hell, but they didn't have purgatory anymore because that was gone. There weren't masses for the dead or requiem masses, any kind of prayers for the dead, any of the rest of that kind of stuff. So they still felt the need to do something to help their loved ones get to heaven, that they couldn't quite put their finger on it. Well, the bottom line is this is what happens when the Catholic Church is kicked out and people were left to their own devices. Weird things like sin eating pop up. But the way it was portrayed in the show kind of tied it into the Catholic Church without coming out and saying Catholic Church, and is talking about purgatory and all this kind of thing, which any Protestant's going to sit there and say, oh, look at those weird Catholics doing a sin-eating thing. They don't have to use the word Catholic. They just say purgatory. It's immediately tied to the Catholic Church. And now suddenly we're all doing this weird cultish sin-eating thing, when actually the truth is that the Catholic Church had nothing to do with it because the Catholic Church was illegal, and these were Protestants who were doing this. Which brings us to the second problem with this whole thing, with this whole untruth. And that's the fact that people are believing entertainment and taking it as fact. So you see, this is a huge problem because we become a culture that just simply wants to be entertained. And we take our entertainment and believe it to be true. All these so-called reality shows on TV, for instance. We keep looking for new forms of entertainment. And if something doesn't entertain us, we go find something new to hold our attention and entertain us. And I think that's the bigger problem there. And what's the biggest danger for us as Catholics is the danger of taking something sacred, namely the liturgy, and turning it into a spectacle. So our new Pope, Pope Leo XIV, when he was just a priest, named Father Robert Prevost, a mere 12 years ago, which I still am amazed. He went from priest to Pope in 12 years. He had this to say in his address to the World Synod of Bishops on the new evangelization back in 2012.
The Church should resist the temptation to believe that it can compete with modern mass media by turning the sacred liturgy into spectacle. Here again, Church Fathers, such as Tertullian, remind us today that visual spectacle is the domain of the saeculum, and that our proper mission is to introduce people to the nature of mystery as an antidote to spectacle.
Okay, so if you don't think this is a problem of turning, our liturgy into a spectacle, let me give you some examples. Okay. One time while on vacation with my family, we went to this one particular church where every time we go to this one town, we go to the same church. Well, they had replaced the bells with some sort of wooden block things going clop, 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 clop. We're like, what the heck is this? That's not a bell. That's like wooden blocks. At the same church, at a different mass, the time for the homily at one point during one mass was given to a member of the laity who was on their parish council, who was talking about some upcoming parish council project. There was no homily given. This is in direct contradiction to canon law that states that the time for the homily if there is no homily, that's fine. You don't have to have a homily. But if there is one, it has to be given by a deacon or a priest immediately after the gospel reading, and that time can't be given to a member of the laity. And here it happened. Now, would it surprise you with this lackadaisical, oddball things going on here? Would it surprise you if I told you that at yet another Mass, this one time, this gentleman walks in, it was past the homily, it was somewhere into the liturgy of the Eucharist. He walks in with his ball cap on, chewing gum, sits down with his family, starts talking to them during the entire liturgy of the Eucharist. When it comes time to receive the Eucharist, he gets in line with everybody else, ball cap still on, still chewing gum. And he received the Eucharist with gum still in his mouth and his ball cap still on. Now, I don't pretend to know what was in this gentleman's heart, but it seems pretty clear to me that reverence was lacking here. That much is very obvious. There's other examples I can cite, like the time that, again, on vacation, went to another church where we walk in, no idea where the tabernacle was to genuflect to. It might have been a closet for all I know. What I did see on grand display was the band right up front, right next to the altar. And boy, did they put on a performance. It was so loud after receiving the Eucharist, I couldn't pray because I couldn't concentrate because the music was too loud. And when they were done with their performance, the audience applauded. This is sacred liturgy. I don't think so. Do you? We are not supposed to turn the sacred liturgy of the Mass into entertainment. Remember, when Jesus was brought to Herod, Herod wanted Jesus to do tricks for him, to entertain him, like a magician. Jesus, in his silence, refused. We should not be Herods. We should not be going to church, going to Mass, the holy celebration of the sacrifice of the Mass. We shouldn't be doing that looking to be entertained. And if you really want to cringe, go online, do some searches for things like clown mass. Because down in South America, within the past decade or so, somebody put on a clown mass. There was also a time, I think it was about 10 or 15 years ago in Chicago, where the Vigil Mass for Christmas, they had like a laser light show and a smoke machine and all this. And like I had all these lay speakers come up and, give speeches. It wasn't a mass. It was a performance. There was another time where someone was given permission to get up in front of the altar and blow bubbles. That kind of thing is not liturgy. It is entertainment. It is not liturgy. It is spectacle. What we have to remember is the Mass is not for you. The Mass is for God. It's called the holy sacrifice of the Mass for a reason, because it is taking the Jewish sacrifice to the next level, the next higher point on the arc, and bringing that old covenant into the new covenant completion. In so doing, we are essentially following in the footsteps of our Jewish ancestors. And there is no way that the Jews would have allowed this sacrifice in the Holy of Holies to be turned into a spectacle. Absolutely not. Would not happen. And yet we are allowing it to happen, or people want it to happen, in our churches during the celebration of the sacred liturgy. So we have to remember, when we start feeling like we need to be entertained at Mass, that the Mass is not for us. The Mass is for God. And if you're going to the Mass because of the charismatic homilies or the music or your friends, you're going for the wrong reason. If you're going to Mass to be entertained, you're going for the wrong reason. So, my fellow saints in progress, we need to be very careful about how we allow ourselves to be entertained, what we take as truth, and about trying to make the Mass into something for ourselves. While the Mass is for our spiritual welfare, ultimately the Mass is for God. And if we are in the presence of Jesus Christ, which we are, whenever we're in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament of the Eucharist, there's a sense of mystery there. There needs to be a sense of mystery there, a sense of awe and of wonder and amazement. We should be reverent in his presence. After all, this is the God-man who is incarnate in the womb of a virgin, became man, and then gave us his literal flesh to eat under the appearance of bread. And unlike the bread of the sin-eaters, Jesus Christ truly takes the burden of all of our sins, truly paid the price for them. We can truly eat of his sacred flesh and drink of his most precious blood, and that mystery, that awe, that amazement is something we should be feeling at every Mass. So check for those imprimaturs. Don't take for fact we're just out there for entertainment. Do your own homework and resist the temptation to turn the sacred into a spectacle. Alrighty, my fellow saints in progress, that's it for this week. May God bless you. And as always, remember that you are a saint in progress, so go out there and be a saint.